that you actually asked your spirit guides about me.
Reading somebody and then past life would come up. Who you are is why you're here. Mm-hmm. You choose a personality for the journey. You ended up being arrested and imprisoned. I explore past lives and I help people figure out their present life. A couple of people who had been in prison with you and they thought you were maybe an informant or something. You weren't at all. Yeah, but you weren't. But they actually beat you up, and as a result of the beating, you died.
I'd like to welcome to the show Ainsley McLeod. How are you doing, Ainsley?
I am doing great. Thank you very much, Alex.
Thank you so much for coming to Next Level Soul Studios.
Well,
I appreciate it.
Delighted to be here.
Yes. I've been looking forward to our conversation. We've had a few people who talk about past lives and how to deal with the trauma and heal and all that stuff, but not a whole lot. And definitely no one, I think, of your depth in that space. Your book, The Old Souls Guidebook. We're going to talk about old souls. We're going to talk about all these things because that's a term that gets thrown around a lot.
It certainly does.
But my first question to you is, what was your life like before this insanity of being a psychic?
Yeah, right.
It was being a psychic.
Well, I mean, it was like, yeah, there's kind of like my life before and my life after.
Right, exactly.
And people have asked me this a lot, when did you know you were psychic? And it really wasn't until my early 40s that I had a couple of major epiphanies. But up until that point, I was a total non-believer. I considered myself to be an atheist. I had no time for any kind of, woo-woo stuff or, religion or spiritual stuff. And the only weird thing was that I was drawn to psychics. I saw my first psychic at the age of 27, and I told myself I was going there to debunk her. And then I came out with my hair standing on end and going, how the hell did she know all that? Right. She'd been following me around. And then after that, I kept encountering psychics and, in public places, and they would come up to me, and it was always the same kind of message, and sometimes they're a bit embarrassed, but they'd say, well, I'm psychic and you should be doing something with it. My spirit guides are telling me. And, but at that time I was going, these people are crazy, go away. If I could go back in time, I'd love to have had deeper conversations with these people, but I kind of just dismissed it. And, but looking back, I mean, I was a musician and illustrator for years. I started off, I went to art school, got into advertising as an art director, became an illustrator, played music on the side, and I had a very, very full life, and I didn't have a lot of contemplative time. I was
kept yourself busy.
Yeah, and there was always something going on, and but I did learn to meditate. I was probably about 30.
So you were an atheist meditator.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
I mean, absolutely.
It's a very interesting, because generally, it's almost like your brain was fighting what your soul was telling it.
Cognitive dissonance.
Yes,
I think
completely.
It is. Yeah, because it was like two things happening. Like I considered myself to be a non-believer, but also I'm really drawn to psychics. And
were you raised religious? I mean, you're Scottish, right?
I'm Scottish.
Yeah.
We were sort of like passively Presbyterian, I guess. Actually, I was about 5 years old when I told my dad I didn't want to go to Sunday school anymore. I didn't buy that whole thing, and and I was very surprised at the time that he went, okay.
Because he wasn't buying it either.
Well, no, he was. He was the son of a minister. But also, if I didn't go to Sunday school on a Sunday, he got an extra hour in bed. So
that's a very
he didn't put up any fight.
Dads are dads, no matter what generation.
Oh, absolutely. So being a dad myself, I totally get it. Yeah. So I just had this life that was pretty chaotic and very busy and very noisy. And very dramatic relationships. I was, a part of my story is that I just always seem to be encountering narcissists.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm what my spirit guides that I work with would call a wounded empath, which is, being empathic but carrying a lot of past life fears. And it makes you a target for narcissists. I had a narcissistic father and then narcissistic relationships. And when you're in those sort of situations, there's never a dull moment. So I was in this world where, there's constantly I'm being shouted at, or, there's drama, there's yelling and stuff. And I think it kept me from going to that deeper place. Like I say, I did learn to meditate. And one of the best things that I did, I actually went to a weekend workshop. Otherwise, I'd never have done it. And that was a bit of a game changer when I was finally able to still the mind and body, get some tranquility into my life. And I think that probably helped. I've had conversations with my spirit guides about why was I chosen, because this would not have been my choice. I mean, I called myself the reluctant psychic for a long time because it was just, why me and why this weird career path? I mean, I was drawn to it, but at the same time feeling, oh, Jesus, why can't I be normal?
It's interesting, Ainsley, that a lot of people in the space, your story is not unique in that sense. Like a lot of psychics, a lot of channelers, especially when they come from a different career path or were raised in a certain way or have certain programming in their head. The why me aspect really comes into play. Why? First of all, when did you first have a psychic experience to the point where you're like, or ruh-roh. Like, what was that?
Well, in retrospect, looking back on my childhood and so on, once I started, on the path, on the psychic path, I could look back and then make sense of things that had happened. But up until that point, I never once thought, oh, that's a psychic experience. I saw ghosts, weird things happen, but I just chalked it up to weird stuff happens. And
like ghosts? You saw, how old were you when you saw your first?
The first one I was really aware of was, I was about 17. I was in the reference library in my hometown of Aberdeen. And it seems ridiculous, but I'm just sitting there and this guy comes up. He's kind of like Humphrey Bogart, like, one of the sort of raincoats, hat pulled down over
not
his
shady
face.
At all.
But not at all. But his face was, it sounds weird, but it's like indistinct.
Yeah.
Like blurry.
Almost faceless, yeah.
Yeah. Comes up, asks me for a light. It's a library, but I didn't think twice. And I was wearing this jacket. I remember this, very trendy maroon jacket that I had at the time. And it had all these different pockets. So I'm kind of like digging around looking for a book of matches. And I smoked cigarettes back then. And I find the matches and where the heck's this guy gone? And, again, with life being so busy and crazy, I didn't really have any time to reflect on it or think about it. Mm-hmm. So it was only really years later that I realized, oh, that was an encounter with a ghost. At least when I started working with spirit guides and they were saying, oh, remember that thing that happened? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was you seeing a ghost. I said, well, why did he want to talk to me? And he said, well, because you're an empath and you have psychic abilities, he knew that you could see him. And that was it. There was no, important message or anything. It was
just like, hey, this guy can see me.
Hey, just made himself visible for a moment and then disappeared. And but as I say, I never thought these things were psychic in nature.
Just weird.
Just
weird stuff happens.
Yeah.
So you were almost in denial. It sounds like normal people, no offense, would see a ghost and freak the hell out. But you were just like, I'm too busy. I got too many things to do. I can't really focus on it.
I think it was just that. And people say, weren't you scared? No, not at all. And I've had a couple of other experiences. It's not like I see ghosts all the time or anything.
You don't see dead people.
Not really. You know, we have
Good.
we have one in our house. I mean, I'm aware of her presence, but
She's
I-
chilled.
yeah, I could sort of like sometimes get a tiny little glimpse. We know she's there, and we say hi to her every morning and good night and stuff. She hangs out just outside the bathroom, and she used to live there. She just likes us being there because we love the home. It's just a nice little connection there. But you know, I never found that sort of thing scary. But I think it's partly because I was just kind of, you know, back in the early days, these things happened, but I never really thought much about, you know, what does this mean or why.
So what moment was it that finally said, "Uh-oh, I'm actually psychic"?
Well, yeah, there were two things. So two kind of epiphanies that happened. And the first one was I was coming out of a very dramatic relationship, and I moved from the East Coast to, I'd moved from Scotland to London to New York to Atlanta, and then I bailed out and went to San Francisco. A friend's apartment came up. So I'm there in a really quiet apartment with peace and quiet for literally the first time that I could remember in my life.
Mm-hmm.
As crazy as it sounds, it was like a feeling of relaxation and oh my gosh, tranquility. And I, you know, the whole thing had been very stressful, and I looked at my hands and they were kind of shaking, and I went, okay, I need to meditate because I haven't done this for years. And I sat down on the sofa, closed my eyes, took a couple of deep breaths, and immediately heard a voice, not in my head, but in the room, the voice of an English psychic who I'd had a reading with 10 years before. I'd been in the States for 5 years at that point. So it was like, that would be 10 years before, no thoughts about, I'd always in the back of my mind thought I'd end up in America, but I didn't really know how. Mm-hmm. And I'm having this reading with this old guy, and he says, "Oh, you're going to end up in California." And I went, "Oh God, went there once, didn't like it," and it was situational. And so he said, "There's nothing you can do about it, nothing." Well, that voice came back in the room. You're going to end up in California. There's nothing you can do about it, and it, you know. And I've told that story a lot, and people go, well, were you frightened when you heard that voice? I got on my feet and I'm dancing around the place going, oh my God, what the hell's happening? Am I going insane? Is it, you know?
As you would.
Yeah.
As a normal person
would.
Absolutely.
What the hell, you know? So, but that really got me started because I did nothing conscious to make this prediction come true. It was just like a set of circumstances. But what it got me thinking about was, and reflecting on all the things that psychics had told me that had come true. I made a list of them that night. But the question I had was, how do psychics do it? Where does that information come from? So the next morning I went to a metaphysical bookstore in San Francisco, Fields Bookstore. And I came out with this great big pile of books, all different subjects, you know, Buddhism, past lives, and all sorts of things. And just read a book a day for, I guess, a couple of months, trying to find the answer. You know, what's the source of this information? How on earth could somebody from 10 years before with such certainty know that this was going to happen? And a hell of a lot of other things as well. I counted, I think it was about 34 predictions that I'd had from psychics. Mm-hmm. And of course, the things they told me, you know, warnings that I didn't pay attention to, you know, things that...
Oh, yeah. I've been there, sir.
Oh, yeah. It's like, you think, why didn't I listen to them? Yeah. So that was the first epiphany, and it really got me interested, got me on the path. About a year later, maybe less, I was living in a houseboat in Sausalito, just north of San Francisco. And again, it was tranquility I was seeking, and it was like, it was helping me to, I think, de-stress from literally decades of drama. And I took a trip to Hawaii. I had a session with a psychic, and she said, "Oh, your uncle's here. He wants to work with you." And she was maybe the third or fourth psychic who told me that my Uncle John was a spirit guide and wanted to work with me. Now, he had been a total non-believer, like I'd been. Yeah. And my response was always a kind of, well, he's the last person I'd think of as a spirit guide. And do I really believe in spirit guides? I'm not sure I do. And, the fact his name was John, I was going, yeah, everybody's got an Uncle John, common name, So I'm trying to, it's almost like explain it away. But next thing, I'm in a bookstore, and I felt, for no reason, I felt like spacey, I wasn't doing drugs, I wasn't, on anything or whatever. I just was feeling really like in a very altered state. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of really weird things that happened. One was I just went to a bookshelf, and I just pulled a book out at random, opened it up at a random page, and literally looked down, and there's the name of two of my parents' closest friends. Mm. It's a story about how they were Scottish. They'd helped some paranormal investigator check out a Scottish ghost that was visiting some lady in the States. Right. And I'm going, that's weird. Put the book back. Went round the corner and ran into my uncle. And he was there.
Uncle John.
Uncle John.
But he's been passed.
He was dead, been dead for like 10 years.
Oh, so Uncle John was there.
So he was there.
In full?
He was there for about 1 second, but three-dimensional and real. Mm. And I know it's hard to explain, but he was more real than he'd been in my memory.
Oh, yeah.
If that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense, yeah.
It was like, oh, yeah, he actually was more like this than maybe the
whatever
picture I had in my head.
Yeah.
And he had a message for me, and he wanted to work with me. And it was a bit of a longer message. He was there for about a second, just maybe about 18 inches away from me on the right side. And then he's gone. But with a longer message about wanting to work together and, talk to me, I'm here to help you, and you're meant to be doing this work. So when I went back to the tranquility of the houseboat, I just went, well, I don't really know how to go about doing this, but I just sat down and went, okay, John, are you there? And it wasn't like a voice exactly. Mm. And I still can't explain exactly how I communicate with the other side. And in fact, it has morphed a little bit over the years as well, changed, or at least in the early months and years. It took a little bit of a time to find the very best way of communicating, but it's my spirit guides call it clairaudience, but it's not like in fact, the guy who told me I was going to end up in California, he literally had a voice in his ear, and which I wish I had, because that was so clear. He would be going, what? Yes, I'll tell him. It was a freak show, but it was quite amazing. But for me, it was like a kind of knowing, and I would get whole sentences. So I started talking to my uncle, and very quickly he passed me over to spirit guides on another level, different level, and they're the ones that I work with now. And so what I did after that was I spent 3 years practicing to a point where my spirit guides are kind of looking at their watches and going, is this guy ever going to do readings for people? Yeah. And finally, they sort of pushed me out of the nest and started finding me clients. I started reading people, and the rest is history.
The rest is history, as they say. That's fascinating. It's so fascinating how many people in this field, they never had plans on it. It wasn't something. Some do, but a lot of people I was the reluctant spiritual podcaster. This was insane for me.
Well, I was the reluctant psychic, and I even tried finding other terms. Spirit channeler was one of
Intuitive,
them.
yeah.
Intuitive, this and that. And terms that were so vague, I think people didn't know what the heck I was talking about.
Right, you got yourself out of work by your marketing.
Right, exactly. And there was this one thing that happened. I was at a party, and the host's father was there, and he was deaf, and he says to me, "So what do you do for a living?" And I would mumble when people asked me that question. It's like, oh God, I can't believe they're doing it. And I went, psychic. He goes, psychotherapist? And I'm going, no, psychic. Psychiatrist? And finally I go, psychic. And everybody in the room, they've been listening.
Like in a movie.
They're all turning around and laughing. Yeah. And that was a moment where I just embraced it. And
Good.
After that, when people said, what do you do? I'd go, I'm a psychic.
And what are the reactions?
Well, that was interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Because you get, there's really two reactions that I get.
Mm-hmm.
One is oh my gosh, I want to talk to you more. I had this amazing experience or whatever. And the other one is they just stare blankly, like they don't know how to respond to it.
It's almost like the programming in their head can't accept this. They've heard of it, but they've never met another human being who's actually doing this
right.
for a living. I get it at a different level. I get something like that with this. They're like, what do you do for them? I'm like, well, I tell them I run a media company now, and that kind of opens them up a little bit. Yeah. But then I'm like, but what do you like? I have a podcast, and that for a lot of people, they're like, how do you make a living? Like, is that all you do? Is just a pod? Because so many people have podcasts now.
Oh yeah,
but they don't get to this level.
Right.
So for them, it's a weird. And I got that when I was in the film industry. What do you do? I'm a film director. What? Like,
right?
Like Spielberg? I'm like, no, not like Spielberg. I wish, but not exactly like Steven. But so I've been getting those kind of reactions throughout my life. So I kind of understand. But now it's even like, what's your so? Oh, what's your podcast about? I go, I talk to psychics, I talk to channelers, I talk to quantum physicists, rocket scientists, near-death experiences. And then by throwing all of that in, they're like, oh, it's very interesting.
Right.
It's a lot more open now than it was 20 years ago.
Oh, I agree. Things have changed rapidly.
Very.
Yeah, it's much easier to talk about it without people looking like you're absolutely crazy. And one thing I've done is I never try to sell people on what I do.
Same here.
What happens in the early days, I was so excited about what I could do and the fact I'm talking to invisible entities on another plane of existence, I wanted to share it with people. But what I found was that if I tried to sell anybody on what I was doing, my throat would close up. Throat chakra would close up. I literally couldn't get the words out.
Interesting.
And so I spoke to my spirit guides about it, and they just said, "You're not here to sell anything.
You're not a converter.
Just present what you do, tell stories, sure. And if people are interested, they'll come to you." So one thing that I try to do is not avoid conversations with people about it. When they say, what do you do? And I will talk about things like spirit guides. And maybe that's new to them. But I try not to pander to, their level of understanding. Maybe they think it's weird. But I don't anymore. I mean, I certainly did in the early days. But that's my life. I talk to spirit guides. I explore past lives, and I help people figure out their present life by understanding the past. So
that's an interesting part of your work, is that you've really focused in on past lives.
Yeah.
That is your niche within the psychic world. When you do readings, it's always about past lives. Do you ever talk to Uncle Bob when he's in the room? Like, if I'm right near, is Uncle Bob behind me? You don't do that kind of work. That's not your work.
Except in the very, very early days before I'd kind of learned how to protect myself and stay on the one level. I talk to causal plane spirit guides. In my early days, I was working out of a shop for a while, and every so often I'd be talking to somebody and I'd be trying to talk about their life purpose, the bigger picture stuff. And suddenly grandma would come in from the astral plane and she'd go, I don't like the color of the curtains. And the person's going, oh, I knew she wouldn't like it. But, and it was fascinating and people were blown away, but it didn't interest me at all. What really fascinated me is what I do now and how past lives play into the present. So that's where it started when I would be reading somebody and then past life would come up, and then more and more often until it really became my shtick. It's what I do. So, for example, when I'm reading somebody now, if I do a first session with someone, I get a past life before we even talk, before meeting the person, and then the fascinating thing to me is figuring out how that's going to relate to the present life.
Interesting.
So, I might find somebody who was a dancer in a past life, but they broke a leg and they couldn't do it any longer, and then find that person is a dancer in this life. Surprise, surprise. That's not really, because they're making up for lost time, the stuff they didn't get to do in the past life. So, that's a bit of a mundane example, but it just became a bigger and bigger part of what I do. We're all of us affected by past lives in ways that most of us don't understand. It's not mainstream.
No, it's definitely not. But one thing I want to, this is the thing that kind of blew my mind off when I first heard the term. And I'd love to hear your perspective on it since you work in past lives. I've been told that that there is no past life, there is no future life, that all lives are happening at the same time. If that is the case, first of all, do you agree with that? And secondly, if that is the case, how do we go? Like, there's no linear time on the other side, obviously. So how does that work? Can you explain it?
It's not my understanding. No, working with my spirit guides, they talk about, time being essentially linear. It is different on the other side, which is why we can get precognition and so on. But that idea of everything happening simultaneously is not something my spirit guides would agree with.
Okay.
So my understanding is that it is more. For example, people have said, have you ever seen future lives? And the answer is no. They haven't happened yet. So,
but you're able to see some part of the future, not future lives, but future
potential. Yeah.
Potential. Mm-hmm. And that's a big key word there, is potential, where a lot of people who want to debunk psychics, they're like, well, you weren't exactly like, well, there is still free will.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing, that we have free will. If some people think that, you hear people talking about everything is meant to be, well, no, it's not. And also that's fine if you're saying that from your beach house in Malibu, but if you're, I don't know, in a secret prison being tortured or something, I don't think you're going to feel like, yeah, this is just where I'm meant to be right now.
Everything's highly evolved.
Yeah.
You have to have highly evolved for that.
No, stuff happens on the physical plane, and we have free will, and that's a big part of what we're here to do. If we came in and everything was predestined, what would the point be? There would be no growth. It'd be like a train on a track. And it
would be as boring as a video game that you knew what was going to happen every single time, and there was no challenge, there was no variation, nothing like that, no variety. Why even play?
Yes.
It's a boring game.
It's exactly that.
It would be a very boring game.
Yeah. So we have, we all have life plans, and that's a fascinating part of it all. Mm-hmm. That's what I break down in sessions. The whole system that I downloaded from my spirit guides, they call it the instruction. It's the title of my first book. Mm-hmm. It's a way of looking at it's 100 elements of or potentially 100 elements of your life plan. Nobody would have all 100, but you can make a selection of different things. Like your personality is all chosen before you come here. Mm-hmm. Things like that, certain missions and so on. But it can all be understood in terms of this system. And we all come here with like a kind of rough outline, but nothing is carved in stone, because you can take it in any direction at all.
But there are, to my understanding, soul plan, soul blueprint, soul contract. Those are all kind of synonymous.
Yeah.
To my understanding is that when you're making your soul plan, that there are, I call them mile markers in your life. So like you're going to be born in Scotland. You're going to be a male. You're going to be born to these parents. You're going to have these opportunities along the way.
Yeah.
You're going to meet this person. And those are kind of those mile markers. Now, how you get from mile marker 1 to mile marker 7, that's truly up to you. And you could go completely off the road, but the farther you go off the path, harder life becomes, and things start to try to knock you back.
Well, that's where your spirit guides come in, because they try to knock you back get you back on track
on the plan that you wanted as a soul
that you created on the astral plane.
Yeah. Yes, because you could go off, like, this life I wasn't going to deal with addiction, let's say, but I got into Hollywood, and all of a sudden I tried a drug, and they're like, oh my God, now I'm starting to go off. That's when someone is going to try to because you're like, that's not what you're supposed to be doing here.
That's it.
But we have free choice. We can kind of go down those roads if you want to. Oh, yeah.
Well, I love what you're saying about mile markers. I'm going to be using that.
Sure, no problem.
Because that's exactly how it feels. There are certain major goals in each life that are, usually things like partnership or work that you want to do. But there's often many different ways to get to that.
Yeah, exactly. So like for me, like on my I never really had a dream as a child to be a filmmaker. I had a couple of indications I liked movies, but there was a video store in my neighborhood, and that was my first job. And I was there for 4 years. If I wouldn't have had that video store job, I don't know how long it would have taken me to actually make the decision to go into the film industry.
Right.
Because when I went into the film industry, it's not nearly as cool as it is today. And there was no information. It was essentially running away with the circus. So that's a mile marker. I had to go through that process.
Right.
My journey with the mob.
That
was
fascinating story,
fascination, but that had to be a moment that I had to go through. That was. I don't think that there was an option for that. I think
I agree.
I think at any moment I had the choice to walk away, but I didn't.
But that's the point, because that's where the free will comes in, because you have the choice because nothing it's not all carved in stone. So you have these agreements with other souls, these experiences that you want to have, and they're going to help you. You may help them, but things don't always work out. You might have an agreement to meet a partner, and then they turn up and they got a severe addiction or some kind of, they develop some kind of mental illness or something. It makes having a relationship very, very difficult.
Or they're just a-holes.
Yeah, well, the most typical one I come across in my work is alcoholism. It's like, now you had this agreement, you come in, that person's often blocked through alcohol abuse. It blocks the heart chakra, and even sort of sometimes the awareness that you have a deep spiritual connection with somebody. You don't get the sense of that meeting the soulmate.
It's a numbing almost.
Yeah. And so it can sometimes make the agreement null and void. So, yes, because something is part of your life plan and the intention is for it to happen, doesn't mean that it comes with guarantees. And I think particularly around soulmates, you can meet somebody and you had a deep soul agreement for this to happen, but something's gone wrong along the way.
We'll get you in the next one.
Yeah. But sometimes what happens, and I've done this myself, where you try to fit this square peg into a round hole because, I know there's this soul connection there, so I should make it work. And when in fact, probably the biggest lesson is to say, hey, this is not going to work. I'll move on. Because there's always multiple alternatives as well to anything that you do. So if things are really not working out, because I've had a lot of people I've worked with have been afraid to leave an abusive partner, say, because they feel, well, I meant to stick in this. There's some lesson there. And I go, no, the lesson is not for you to develop boundaries, maybe, or not allow yourself to be abused.
That should be the lesson, not I have to be abused.
Not I have to somehow be abused for some mysterious reason.
So when we met a little while ago, when you came in, you said something that was interesting to me, that you actually asked your spirit guides about me, and you did research
Yes, I
on me
did.
before you came.
Yeah.
I assume that's how you check all podcasts that you go on. I'm like, let me just check out who these guys are
Yeah.
before I go down there. You said it was a very fascinating reading. I have really never on the show or anything like that ever had any sort of like past life readings, and I don't want to do a full reading or anything like that, but I'm just curious what you came up with.
I'll give you some of the highlights.
Yeah, some highlights, and it also maybe as an example of what the kind of work you do and kind of readings that you do.
Well, one of the things that I always do is look at the personality of the person that I'm working with. Because who you are is why you're here. You choose a personality for the journey. In my book, I talk about how you wouldn't wear flip-flops to climb Mount Everest. You choose a personality for the journey ahead.
Interesting. I never really thought about that before. Yeah, because if it wasn't for my personality, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. Like, there's a very distinct...
Who you are draws you to certain experiences.
Right.
Now, you're a spiritual soul type, like most of the people I work with. You develop that through lifetimes, actually, as a contemplative or a healer, but it doesn't mean that's what you necessarily do in this life, but it will give you an interest in spirituality. You have a primary influence of a performer, which means that you've been on stage in previous lifetimes, singer, dancer, actor, presenter, salesperson, and that gives you people skills. And part of the journey for you, this is kind of going a little bit off just the personality. Sure. There's a little bit more to it. You're here to actually make an impact on the world. You want to make a splash, and you have to be well known to be able to do that. And I don't want to get too down in the weeds, but one thing that you're here to it's an important part of your life plan is to make sure you don't push away any kind of level of celebrity when it comes along, like feeling maybe it's egotistical to want to be noticed or something, because how you will have the biggest impact in this world will be related to how well known you become. So that performer in you always wants the biggest bang for the buck. If you can reach 500 people, how do you reach 500,000? It's always looking to maximize whatever you do. And avoid any tendency to push away fame when it comes your way as well. So, and then there's a few other things that show up in your personality. One thing I really like is that you've got the leader in you, so you've got an air of authority, but you also have it coupled with a caregiver influence, which is from taking care of people in past lives. So you've got a warmth and, as I turned up here today, I felt welcomed. I felt warmth. It's like, you're immediately just so charming and welcoming, and that's that. The heart. The caregiver is associated with empathy and everything around the heart chakra. A lot of it's actually healing the heart chakra from trauma from past lives as well. There is an interesting past life that you had. And I got quite a bit of detail, but I'll give you the highlights of that if you want to.
Sure. It's fascinating.
The past life was in Spain during Franco's regime.
Okay.
During...
what years were the Franco regime?
From 39 to 60.
So
59 or something like that.
So we're talking about 2,000 years ago.
We're talking about just
recently,
20th century.
Yeah, I remember. My Spanish history is a little foggy, so please forgive me. I'm like, Franco sounds familiar,
right?
So that's what in the 1900s.
Yes, so probably from around the beginning of World War II to.
Is that during their civil war?
Yes,
that's what I thought. Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you.
So Franco was the fascist leader.
Yes.
You were a journalist or a writer, and you wrote something about him. Or about corruption in his regime. It put a target on your back. You ended up being arrested and imprisoned. I even got the prison. It was, what was it called? La Model or something like that.
What city is that in, if you want me to ask?
It's in Barcelona.
Interesting.
Yes, you're in Barcelona.
I might be going there this year.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, that's going to be so interesting because you're going to feel something.
I want to go. That's why I'm asking. I'll just go just to see if I feel anything.
I guarantee it.
Okay, well, I'll get the name exactly.
Call me as soon as you get there.
Yes, I'd love to know.
So you while you were in prison, you wrote a kind of memoir, but you wrote it in Catalan, which apparently Franco was not very happy about people speaking Catalan or Catalanese. I don't know what you call it, but and everything you wrote was destroyed. Once you got out, I think you did something like 2 or 4 years in a prison. Once you got out, you kind of allied with some trade union people, but there was a couple of people who had been in prison with you, and they thought you were maybe an informant or something. You weren't at all. Yeah, but you weren't. But they actually beat you up, and as a result of the beating, you died.
In prison or outside prison?
This is outside prison. This is maybe a couple of years after. And so there are several things that come from this. One is that anybody who's been imprisoned, at least for long enough, will have a past life fear around powerlessness, because when you're in a prison, you have no control, no agency. So how it normally shows up in this life is if somebody tries to control you, you get that sort of equal and opposite reaction. So it's always associated with the phrase, "Don't tell me what to do." Probably ask your missus about that.
Oh yeah, you could ask her about that. I have a horrible relationship with authority.
Yes,
I've had that since I was a child.
Of course.
And one of the reasons why I literally do everything on my own.
Yeah,
I'm outside of the system. I'm outside of. I built my entire career outside of Hollywood, even though I was invited in every once in a while. But I would always be outside, doing my own thing, because I could not have anyone tell me what to. Like if someone tried to produce this show, they would not get far.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely.
It just
and actually,
sense.
You touched on something that is related to that past life. When you died, there was a feeling of abandonment, rejection, and that can be anything. When you die on your own, it's often a battlefield type death. I'll see where this rejection comes in, feeling of being abandoned by humanity or God, if that's your belief, or whatever. And you had that feeling of rejection and abandonment. And when you have that, in this life, you're going to have a sense of being an outsider, or like you don't fully fit in. Then you've got that issue with authority for terribly obvious reasons. Yeah. And another fascinating thing as well, I'd be really interested to see how this shows up. When you've had a lifetime, or very often, it depends, not everybody would have this, but when you've had a life where you've been imprisoned, incarcerated, or enslaved, where there's a level of austerity, looking at 4 brick walls for 24 hours every day, there's no color, there's no natural beauty, and so on. It leaves the soul craving that in future lifetimes. So your soul wants to have beauty around it, whether it's exposure to nature, trees, plants, flowers, or it could be art or color or something like that. Mm-hmm. But beauty to make up for the austerity. It's like the karmic pendulum swinging from one direction to another. Mm-hmm. So whether it's having nice art on your walls, I noticed coming in, mm-hmm. It's decorative. I mean, I wish people would see the whole of this studio that we're in, because it is beautiful.
Oh,
I mean,
thank you.
Look at this, I rest my case. But that's an important thing for you to have in this life to make up for the absence of it in the past life.
Interesting.
And there's more.
Yes.
So when you've been singled out for mistreatment like you were, it creates a fear around self-expression. And then what you want to do to overcome that is that you want to express your thoughts. You want to get things out into the world. You want people to know where you stand on things. That it's very important for your opinion to be heard, and for you to stand up for your right to hold maybe views that are not mainstream or whatever. And I'd imagine that's something you would mm-hmm. kind of resonate with.
Very much
probably
so.
Quite strongly.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Another thing that came up from that life is one of the lessons that you're learning, and it's very much related to what you're doing in this work, is about discernment. And it's about separating the wheat from the chaff, like separating the authentic from the BS in a world where there's a lot of the BS as well as a lot of really great authentic stuff. But it's learning to discern the difference to be able to then help other people to do that.
That makes perfect sense, because a lot of people watch this show, and if they see somebody on the show, they think automatically like, well, Alex did the research and he wouldn't let a charlatan come on the show. And we do the best job we can. You know? Can I say all 500 and something episodes were knocked out of the park? Probably not, especially early on. But nowadays, my wife and I really, put a guest through the ringer before they come on. And a lot of it's instinct.
Yeah.
I trust her instinct and I trust my instinct. And I will be able to, like when you came across our computer screen, she's always the first to look at it. And if it passes her, then it gets to me. Generally. A lot of times it comes through me. Some magical way it gets to me. That happened with a bunch of great guests that we've had. But then I looked at what you were doing. I was like, oh, past lives, interesting. I haven't done a lot of that. And I always tell her the same thing. Get me a video clip. Get me a video clip. I just need to see him. I need to hear him and I need to see him. And within 5 seconds, I'll go, yep. Yeah. No, it's just that. It's literally intuitive. That. Yeah. It's that quick. It's not like this. It's not mental. It's not, there's a little bit of mental, but it's all feeling. And I'll look at him like, yep. Or something like, nope, don't know what's going on there, but there's something there I don't like. Yeah. And that's just the way, it's just unfortunately the way it is. So I
did the same with you, by the way.
I'm assuming you did. Yeah, you have these powers. I don't know what I have, but I listen to my instinct. And I've heard that from other guests that because they get asked on the shows, and not every podcast is equal, not of size, but just the way they approach things. And I'm assuming that they do homework on me. They'll either talk to their spirit guides or they'll tune in to me and see what I'm actually about. And we try to, we're here to help.
Yeah.
We're here to help. That's really the bottom line. I want to shine whatever light I'm able to create, to shine it on people who are actually doing good work in the world.
Well, I talked about you being a spiritualist soul type, and the important thing is that people benefit from what you do in this life. That's where you will get that real sense of purpose. Plus, you have something called a desire for immortality, which is not about living forever. You'll be glad to know. Like usually,
I drink a green drink every morning, sir.
But usually, when old souls hear that, they go, "Oh God, I'm done." Please don't tell me I'm going to be stuck here forever.
I'm going to do like the whole Moses thing, 900 years. I can't.
No. It just means you want to leave a legacy or create a ripple effect in some way.
Okay.
Leave the world a better place for your having been here. And the common ways of doing that are to write a book. That's probably the most common. Mm-hmm. Then things like making movies, recording music is another one. But these things that leave a legacy. Mm-hmm. So it's a big part of what you're here to do as well. That's a major motivation for you to do what you do.
Yeah, this is all very fascinating.
And it's all in your life plan. It's
part of it.
Yeah.
There was a moment of the why me scenario, like you had.
Yeah.
Like why me? Like why am I going to do this work? That's a problem a lot of people have in their own self-doubt, because the programming that they've received is the self-worth is not there, the self-love is not there. They haven't connected internally yet with a lot of their own stuff to accept ideas like this or accept missions like this.
Yeah.
I've been told what I'm supposed to be doing 1,000 times. It was my first spirit guide. She's alive. She's been on the show. She's very ornery, and she's one of those people I've known since I've been also like you. I was attracted to psychics, but it's cultural for us. Since I'm Cuban, it's in our blood. So I was always attracted to psychics. It was always something. My mom would take me to some guy's house or some lady's house, or like, we're having a reading today. We're like, all right. And then I would completely be like, so what's my future? And I was back in the day, very into like, what's going to happen? I was very insecure about the future. I was always like, when am I going to have this? When am I going to do that? When am I going to find love? And like all that kind of.
Oh, I was totally like that.
Yeah.
Oh, I just, I want to know what's happening next. And
because I'm terrified. Mm-hmm. Now I'm like, whatever's coming is coming. Like,
Right.
I'll just ride the wave.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit more chilled now.
Mhm.
And the funny thing is that I have a Rolodex. That's how old I am. I have a Rolodex.
You're really showing your age.
Yeah, I'm
there.
showing my age, sir. I'm showing my age. I have a Rolodex of some of the top psychics, mediums, channelers in the planet and relationships with them. And I don't think I've ever once called anyone for a reading. It's just, if they offer it, I'll be like, all right, cool.
Right.
Yeah. You know, like you did, like you I'm like, oh, cool.
Mhm.
But I would never in a million years call you up. I'm like, listen, like I wouldn't do that. It's just weird.
One of the reasons I would have thought is that you are so much on track from what I was seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Some people I work with, I have to haul them from way over there to way over here.
Right.
You're on track. You're doing. I mean, there's lots of different ways that you can express who you are, but what you're doing right now is perfect. It's checking all the boxes.
Appreciate that very much. Your book is called Old Soul's Guidebook. The term old soul is thrown around a lot.
Oh, into
You know, a lot. I have one child that was born, and when she came in, I was like, I just call her the old lady. 'Cause she's just this old, my other daughter's a little younger vibe of a soul.
Sure.
I feel it. My wife does as well. But the other one is like literally like an old lady. Like she acts like an old lady. She talks like an old lady.
Yeah.
Her point of view on things. I'm like, gee, what? I mean, and then I tell them, you're an old soul. They're like, what? My favorite thing to do is always tell them, anytime they get angry at me or angry at my wife or, doing parenting stuff, that I go, hey, you chose me. And they're like, we didn't choose you. It's just random.
Oh, no.
It's the best.
Oh, yeah. You choose your parents and they choose you. It's all by agreement. And the big question people always ask is, why, or what was I thinking?
I must have been in a rush that day. That's what my wife says to me all the time. Oh, I must have been in a rush if I picked you this life.
Well, we don't always make the wisest choices, but and things don't always work out. But the reason that we choose our parents, for example, can be to trigger issues to be worked on.
Of course.
It's a tough way to get the lessons, but your soul doesn't want to continue to keep going through lives and not being able to work through stuff. So sometimes it forces it a little bit. You might be working through that fear of rejection I talked about. So the person with that may want to trigger that to come more to the surface. And by choosing maybe a family where the parents are distracted or their mum doesn't really bond with you or something like that.
Anyone born in Generation X. Got it.
Yeah, that's essentially it. Yeah. So then it brings all fears come from past lives. They get triggered by experiences in this life, but the cause is not this life. It's always pre-existing. That's why people react in very different ways to trauma. Let's say siblings lose a parent. One sees it all about loss. Another one could see it all about self-esteem or abandonment. It depends on what's lying in the past life. There's another thing about this. It's actually related to very much to the work that you do with that fear of rejection that you're working through in this life. And I think every single podcaster that's interviewed me in the last 4 or 5 years, since my last book came out, has this. You're trying to heal this fear of rejection by creating community. It's by bringing people in. It's one way to heal is to belong, and if you can belong and you don't get rejected, that's very, very healing. But to be the uniter, to be the person who's responsible for bringing people together, that's an elevated way of healing. And it can be small things like calling somebody to go for a cup of coffee, or it can be big things like, well, we have a membership community, for example, and it fulfills that purpose. We're healing our own issues by helping other people come together and have a safe community, our soul world community, where they can hang out and they can share their journey and learn about their soul's purpose, and so on.
That's beautiful. That's very beautiful. So what is an old soul?
An old soul is somebody who's been around the block a few times, or many, many times.
How many lives are we talking about? Because that number changes.
I know. So, some people are radical.
Like hundreds, or is it thousands, or is it like 15? Like, I've heard all sorts of things.
Most people that I work with would have. Most people I work with are old souls. They've the
Makes
people who
sense.
are going to be interested in this work tend to be older souls. So they've usually been on this planet for, it could be something like 5,000-6,000 years would be roughly how long it takes to get to very much to the end of the journey. And usually something around about 110, 120 lifetimes. Although it can be hard because generally your soul wouldn't count lives where you never really got off the ground because there's so much infant mortality
Back in the day.
past or even now.
And that does, when there is infant mortality, there is something that the soul takes from that life, right?
Oh, of course, but it usually would feel like a failed life. It's the term that's
False start.
yes, yeah. Like you didn't get on track. You didn't get the chance to do all the things that you'd really set out to do because you didn't make it long enough. So usually then you'll want to come back and complete something. But yeah, so the actual number can be, I mean, it could be 200 plus if you take into account the times that you didn't make it beyond age 2 or something.
So right now, currently, our current system, what I was taught in school, I'm sure what you were taught in school, that we're about 6,000 years old or so, give or take, humanity. Though we've been around for hundreds of thousands of years, where we are now, like where the Great Pyramids and all that kind of stuff was around 6,000 years ago. Though archaeological stuff is happening now that, Göbekli Tepe and all of these other things are pushing our timeline farther and farther back up to 15 to 20,000 years in the Younger Dryas, and we can go down that road. But like I've heard many people talk about lifetimes in Atlantis, lifetimes in Lemuria, and even farther back. Have you come across those?
No,
Not yet,
not at all. My spirit guides won't go there.
They don't go that far back.
Well, no, they won't go to that subject. So
Interesting.
yeah, it's just like I've asked them about Atlantis. They go, "It's just this is not your thing." It's just.
You're not the first to say that too, because there was another psychic medium I know, good friend of mine, and she started to go down. She just started questioning about life on other planets, which, if you just look at the universe logically, there's something going on.
Oh, yeah.
And we can cut.
My spirit guides say that people who think we're alone in the universe, they say it's a failure of imagination more than anything else.
I mean,
look at the scale of the universe.
I mean, the scale of the universe is so infinite. Yeah. You mean to tell me we're the ego, our little egos?
It is ego.
Like we're the only ones. Well, remember, we used to be the center of the universe, and the world, everything
revolved around us.
And we figured that out
right.
a little bit.
Yeah.
But she started going down that route, and her guide said, "Nope, that is not your lane. Get back
absolutely
on your lane." So that's very interesting that you said that.
Yeah. So it's things that my spirit guides just don't want me. I can't even answer. They just don't want to talk about it.
It's not your brand.
Exactly. It's not my shtick or
it's not your
whatever.
shtick. It's not your brand. And if you start going off, it's going to muddy the waters.
Yeah.
You need to be very focused on what you're doing.
It's exactly that.
Have you ever come across past lives in other incarnations that are not earthling?
No.
Not even?
No.
It's not. So they're only going to work. So if I come, even if, let's say I was a king warlock somewhere, Sharlock in another planet somewhere,
right.
An Avatar. I was in the Avatar planet. I'm a Na'vi somewhere over there, and I had multiple lives as Na'vi. When I work with you, it's only going to be earthling or earth-based.
That's all I get. That's all that comes in. You come in human, and people ask about, was I a dog in my last life or whatever? No,
right.
No, you've been human from the beginning to the end, and that we stay in our lane. We stay in our species. So that's all I can tell you on that one. But you have to go back to the old soul thing because we live in a world that is not always conducive to the happiness and well-being of old souls.
Stop it.
Yeah, I know. Shocking.
Shocking.
Isn't it?
Shocking,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah.
Also, empaths, not so good either.
I know. So, what I talk about is the difference between young souls and old souls, and how this journey takes you. It takes you from a place of me to we. This self-absorption, this very limited view of the world,
Right.
to recognizing that we're all connected, that we're all one. And that becomes so much clearer when just because you've had all this experience. You've been in every part of the world. You've been male, you've been female, you've been poor, you've been rich. You've been all over the place and had all these experiences. So when you get to the end of the journey, wherever you look, there you go. You identify. It's like empathy. I mean, it's really, the journey can also be described as coming from fear to love. And with love, it's empathy, compassion, and caring. Young souls have still to get that. And unfortunately, we live in a world where there's so many young souls in positions of power, especially what's happening right now in the States.
Oh, the bull in the China shop era, as I like to call it.
It's kind of dispiriting.
Yeah, of course.
And it's very triggering for a lot of old souls as well, especially ones who had, with what's happening now, with an authoritarian president and this rise of fascism that's going
around
on
the
now.
world. Around the world.
Yes.
Yeah, around the world.
It's not just here. And it's triggering memories for a lot of old souls. Franco, Stalin,
Yeah.
Hitler,
Sure.
all
Mussolini,
the Mao.
God, yeah.
So there's been so much of that, and these old souls know how dangerous this is. What's happening politically in the States this is the difference between young and old souls. Old souls tend to be much more, it's about the heart and this connection with others. So, it hurts an old soul to see people, being marginalized or
Sure.
picked on because of, like
Sex,
trans, or
yes,
they're an immigrant, or
race,
the wrong
yeah,
color, or
Sure.
whatever. They have different beliefs and so on. Very, very triggering because it reminds them of their own experience. But young souls, unfortunately, they see themselves and the other, and it's all fear. Everything that's going on right now is massively fear-based, and it's greed that we're seeing like never before. It's fear.
But let me ask you, Ainsley. Right now, humanity is going through some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question about it. And what you're talking about kind of leans itself into that. I talk a lot about what's happening to humanity because it's important. People need to understand because there's a lot of confusion going on. The world's changing so rapidly. And a lot of great things are happening in the world, no question.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of negative things that are happening in the world, like you're describing. It sounds to me that we are, as a species, as a collective consciousness, going through our own karma, and humanity is being we've gone, just like we were talking about, we've gone off the highway that we as a collective has agreed upon.
Yes.
We're gone so far off now that I always say it's a whisper first, then it's a tap, then it's like, hey, and the spirit guides are trying to tell you got to get back on until the sledgehammer comes. We're in the sledgehammer era. We're getting sledgehammered left and right in every walk of life.
And as my spirit guides would say, the world was never meant to be this way.
Right.
We went off track a long time ago, thousands of years ago, and now we're kind of we're reaping what we kind of sowed.
But we are changing. There is an awakening now.
My second book is called The Transformation, and it's about the shift in consciousness that's going on right now. And it gets described in different ways. Most people in the spiritual world will have some idea of, they talk about, an awakening or whatever. So what I got from talking to the spirit world, because what I always try to do is go back to the source. Even if I think I got an inkling of how something works, I always go back and talk to spirit guides and go, okay, So what's all this about? So when I asked them about this big shift, they call it the transformation. It turns out to be that we're going through something as humans that we last went through about 55,000 years ago. Okay. And that's when we got a shift in the level of consciousness. We went from what's called a stage 2 consciousness to stage 3, gives us much more creativity, ability to freedom of thought, and the ability to make more decisions. And it's really led us to be the creatures of reason and creativity that we are now. But we're actually going through another shift from stage 3 to stage 4. And it's taking us all, I mean, it will affect young souls to some extent. But what we're seeing, and this has been going on for a while, it's pushback. It's pushback from these younger souls who don't understand what's going on, and they're afraid of it.
And they're trying to hold on to the ways.
They're trying to hold on to the power and the way it used
it's
to
always
be.
been. Right?
It's this terrifying change that they're seeing, and they don't understand it. Part of the problem is that, and it's not to say there's, young soul bad, old soul good or anything, but it's very hard for a lot of young souls to feel empathy for those unlike themselves, which is the source of racism, homophobia, transphobia,
Sure.
and all of that. So it's all fear through lack of understanding. So, one thing that just blew me away was a quote from Elon Musk, who's a young soul. He's, an inexperienced young soul. He's also a narcissistic sociopath. It just is, Sure. I'm not being, Sure. mean or unkind. Sure. He just happens to be. He's acting completely from ego and fear. And, it's why no amount of money is ever going to be enough for him. It's all fear. And so he said something the other day about he sees that something like the biggest challenge facing Western civilization is empathy.
There's too much of it.
Yeah, well, he doesn't get it because he lacks empathy, as a lot of people around him do. And
it's the chainsaw and all that.
Yeah, but they literally lacking that ability to identify with other people, to be able to put himself into other people's shoes. And that's why you see this level of cruelty, just throwing people out of work or throwing people out of the country, or even, what's happening in Texas. Lawmakers are trying to push through a bill to make it literally illegal to be transgender. And as the father of a transgender son, I of course I've got skin in the game, as it were, but as an old soul, I would be standing up for transgender rights regardless, because it's the right thing to do. But younger souls, to them, it's the other, and they have to have somebody to focus on, somebody to hate. Because it galvanizes them, it brings them together, makes them feel more cohesion. There has to be, the enemy. Something that I actually wrote in my first book, The Instruction, was about young souls and power. They get very drawn to power. So even in countries that are more kind of old soul, they often have younger soul leadership, because these are more ambitious, driven souls that end up in these positions of authority. And what I said was that young souls don't want to govern, they want to rule. And the biggest enemy is not usually a foreign country, it's the opposition party, if one is even allowed to exist. And you'll see what's happening right now is, the biggest enemy is to the current administration is
the other side.
Is here. It's not Russia, or certainly not Russia, but or other countries as much as the enemy within. But they need that to feel that sense of differentiation and have an enemy to bring them together.
So, but right now, though, there is that awakening. There is something happening. Shows like this.
Yes, I would like to talk about something more positive
Yes,
as well.
I get you. No, I get you. No, and it's important for people to understand the reasoning why certain things are happening, and that there is an awakening happening. There's just no doubt about it. I mean, you 30 years ago, this doesn't happen. You're not publicly talking about this.
Absolutely not.
You're in the back alley somewhere in a metaphysical bookshop
right.
doing readings because that's the only place you could do it. Or you're at someone's house and the only reason you get readings is because somebody, I know this guy, and that kind of thing. Where nowadays it's very much out in the open.
And that is a total sign of this transformation.
Oh, absolutely. Well, this show being as popular as it is a sign.
It's totally a sign.
It's a sign that there's something going on. And not just my show. Many other shows are also very popular as well, who are doing good work and getting the word out and things. But these shows some of these shows have been around 7-8 years. And now they're starting to flourish a little bit after doing it for 7 or 8 years.
Right.
We came on 3 years ago and been able to do what we've been able to do in that short amount of time. So that says something. That a filmmaker with no spiritual background, publicly at least, could do what we're doing. So there's no doubt in my mind there's an awakening happening. Where do you see where humanity is going to go? Have your spirit guides told you, like, okay, it's going to be a rough ride. Hang on tight, but you're going to be fine? Or is it like, yeah, you guys are out in about 3 years. So like...
Yeah.
Hopefully it's not the latter.
Yeah. Well, gosh.
And if it's not good news, I'll just edit this out.
I don't want to depress people, but what we're going through right now is not something that we're meant to go through. It's an aberration. This is, it's gone horribly wrong. So
reaping what you sow. Reaping what you sow.
Yes.
Kind of.
And when I asked the spirit guides about things currently in the States, they described it as a disaster. So, and there's no getting away from that. It is really horrible. You just see that the cruelty being inflicted on people. And maybe you haven't been affected personally. You don't think it's such a big deal. But you look at what's happening to other people who are being, marginalized. They're losing their livings, their home, and so on. This is really, it's horrible stuff. And it's not going to get better anytime soon. But what we as old souls have to do is come together. This is the really, really important time. This is the time for cohesion, for community, for being there for each other. And it's an opportunity to really walk old soul values. We are all meant to walk paths as old souls. Well, as any soul we're meant to do it, but particularly as old souls. We're meant to walk the path of truth, freedom, peace, love, understanding, equality, and so on. There's 10 paths. And we are also meant to lead by example as well, to stay in a heart-centered place and be an example to others, particularly younger souls who need to see that sort of thing. So there's never been a more important time for us to come together, find our community, find our people. And this is what you're doing. This is what an amazing thing you're doing, to be able to bring people together with fascinating stuff they can learn from, stuff that appeals to older souls. Younger souls, they're not going to, I don't think you'll have many of them being drawn to this kind of work,
Not so much, I don't think.
It's like, they might be drawn to you, but they're going to have pitchforks and flaming torches and,
Let's hope not. I'm sure I had a past life or two with those.
Yeah. But community, that is a really important thing right now, because there's a lot of fear. It's being foisted on the old souls. And as I said before, a lot of old souls are being triggered. And the worst thing to do when your fears, like loss is a really big one, rejection, the worst thing is to isolate. The best thing is to find your people, feel that you're part of something, and so that you're not going through the stuff alone.
That's yes.
I mean, it's a big reason why we have our Soul World community, and whether you know it or not, it's a big reason why you're doing this. It's spiritual work.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why we opened up Next Level Soul TV as a place to get really clean, conscious movies and televisions and episodes and audiobooks and things to help these souls along their path in a way, because there just doesn't exist now. It might exist more of this kind of stuff in the future.
Oh, definitely.
With no question. But right now, there is not a whole lot out there.
Well, you're kind of at the Wright brothers stage. Really.
You're absolutely right. I love that term, the Wright brothers stage. Yeah, we're just like, soon everyone's going to be on planes.
That's
but right now, we're building the first one. We're building one of the early ones. The same thing with the car, Model T stage. We're at that stage right now. I wanted to ask you about generational trauma. So two different roads here. So there's our own past lives, right? So we have our own karma, we have our own fears that we bring in from other lives, things like that. And I have a funny story to tell you about a fear of mine that it's not a fear. I call it a healthy fear. It's not not a phobia, but it's a healthy fear, I believe.
Right. Okay.
And then there's generational trauma from your family line, or your race line, or even your country's line of what happened to them. So I wanted to talk about both of those, but on a funny story of how I discovered this. I was in Mexico, and I was going to Chichen Itza and Tulum and those kind of places, and I was in a site called Coba, and I was by myself, basically on a walkabout. This is before I met my wife. And I saw this pyramid, and everyone's going up to the top. I'm like, oh, cool. And I was like, start climbing up the pyramid. And then about, 3/4 of the way up or something like that, I'm kind of like, I'm tired. Let me just sit here on the step and turn. The second I turned around, I had never been that high in my life. And I was like, and I got real small. I got terrified. And I just grabbed my camera at the time. I was like, click, click, click. I was here. I'm going down. And I asked to the stairs all the way down, these ancient steps, going all the ass down. And only years later, I had a meditation where I had a vision of, I guess, me at the top of like a Mayan or Aztec pyramid being sacrificed and tossed off.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's why I'm afraid of heights, and also terrified of being at the top of a pyramid.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. The dreams or these visualizations that you get are very often past life related. Mm-hmm. And there's a few things there. The fear of heights. Now, I had dreams. I had a recurring dream when I was a kid. I was Native American, and I was on a cliff. I climbed down a cliff to collect eggs, and I found I couldn't get up and I couldn't get down, and it was a feeling of like I'm going to die. It's just a question of how long I can hold on for, but I can't. There's no way to get out of this, but I felt myself falling, but never felt myself hitting the ground. And I don't know how many times I had that dream. And when I was able to talk to spirit guides, it turned out that was a real past life that I had. And I always had in the dream, it was an awful feeling of, my whole body, even thinking about it now, I can get a little bit of a visceral reaction, almost like a tingling kind of a feeling. And so this happens with a lot of dreams that are there to get your attention, show you stuff that needs to be worked on. Heights can come from experiences like that, falling from a cliff, or being on the top of a high structure like that. It can also be things like being thrown off a horse and dying.
But that trauma stays with the soul, huh?
The trauma stays with the soul. Now, there's kind of two levels of it. One is, for something to show up as a fear, it has to, in the past life, have taken you off your life plan. It has to rise to that level And maybe not even permanently, but at least for a certain duration. That you're, and the other one is if it takes you directly to death.
So falling off a horse is not a big deal. If you fall off, you get back on.
So if you fall off, you're not hurt, and you get back on, and you just sprained your ankle or something, no big deal. That would never show up in a future life. But if you fall off and you break your neck and die, then you're going to have a big fear of heights in the future.
And horses.
And horses.
Possibly
very,
horses.
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there is one other, it's a little esoteric, but if you suddenly get evaporated, you're on a battlefield and a shell goes off right there, and you're there 1 second and you're dust the next. There's a disconnection there with the soul separated from the body, and almost like, I mean, it's not literal, but it's got sort of left hanging, and that creates a fear of heights.
Interesting.
But I don't see that these days really as much as things like having a fall. That would be much more common. And then, of course, one interesting thing about that is that I've worked with people who can't go up a ladder, like 2 steps on a ladder, and they're freaking out.
Yeah.
But they'll throw themselves out of a plane. They'll skydive, or they'll bungee jump, because with every fear, the soul is trying to get you to face it. It doesn't want to sit there and keep having it. It's so, and that's why people get exhilaration from doing something like bungee jumping, because there is so much fear, but they're also conquering it. So it feels like once they do it and they survive, it's exciting because they've overcome something really big. If you had no fear of heights, it's not going to be the same thing. So that's where it comes from. And death-related fears, my spirit guides refer to them as phobias. And actually, can I give you a story? I put this in my last book, and I was just thinking about it yesterday because the person involved is a podcaster from here in Texas, and
I know a few of them.
Right, and Kerry is her name. She's allowed me to write about her, so she's happy for me to use her name. Usually, I
keep it quiet.
I change names for privacy, but so Kerry, she has had a stutter, very noticeable stutter, and when I was doing a reading for her, I found a past life where she had been. It was in France. It wasn't the time of the revolution, but I think it was maybe a bit before that. And I can't remember now why she got into some trouble, but she got beheaded. On her way to the guillotine, she was ridiculed. People are, the streets, they're throwing stuff,
tomatoes,
jeering, and this stayed with the soul. It's this kind of ridicule. It was it's related to a fear of judgment. And also self-expression, throat chakra. The issues are all about self-expression. And so she lost her head. Actually, interesting, people who have been beheaded, and it's a little bit more common than you might think. It was a very common form of execution all over Europe until very recently, and other places. So I do come across it from time to time. It almost always relates to neck and shoulder issues. And I literally had a client whose 20 years of chronic pain, neck and shoulder pain, disappeared as I'm telling her about a past life where she got beheaded. But I digress. It's the ADHD. So one thing that happened as well to Kerry was that just like when she was arrested in that life, it's like a rifle butt in her foot just to stop her from running away or something, broke some bones in her foot. That shows up as some kind of injury in this life. She's always had an issue there. But for past life fears to come up, there's a trigger, and her trigger was going to school. And so she, like age 5, she said she came back from school with a stutter. And it was probably something like, feeling judged by the teacher or maybe judged by other students, but it created that fear that came up. And And I actually said to her, according to my spirit guides, and I actually cringe sometimes when my spirit guides do this. I mean, they're always right, but when they say, when they give a promise, like in her case, they said, next time you go in front of a microphone, your stutter will be gone. And this isn't any kind of mind over matter thing. It's just, it's because of this is how it works. We get reminded of what happens in the past and it clears out these blocks. So because she was doing a podcast, next day she's in front of a microphone and her stutter
It's gone.
is gone. Just like that.
I've heard stories of like, so if you were shot in the battlefield in the back, in this life you will have a mole there or something like that. There was another one I heard, a past life where it was a Viking, or I think it was a Scottish red-headed Scottish giant kind of dude, and he got axed in the shoulder.
Yeah.
And this life, that person had bad shoulder injury. Like nothing ever happened to him, but he just always was pained.
You can spot different places in the body, based on what happened at the time of death, where the injury was. A lot of right-handed swordsmen or X-Men coming down on the left side, absolutely. So a lot of left side shoulder stuff I see, or neck issues. Stabbing or being shot in the abdomen, that will create, could be anything from IBS to Crohn's.
Celiac.
Yeah, well, I haven't been able to. I'm celiac, so we've talked about this. I've not been able to cure myself, but I have. I've got several clients who've blown through Crohn's as a result of doing the past life work. Psoriasis seems to be very much related to past lives. I've had a few clients who've gotten over that. In each case, it takes roughly from the soul being reminded about the past life, something like maybe about a month.
And it's also just the soul letting go?
Yeah. It's the moment the soul can't separate one life from the rest. Because
it's all hodgepodge inside.
Well, it doesn't die between lives. So you
it's
might
just bringing all of it with you.
Yeah.
It's all the baggage of all the lives.
It's all being carried with you. Now, it stretches off into the past, and the further back the fears, and they get forgotten about. They fade, or they get worked through. So I don't usually look at past lives more than maybe 200 or 300 years back. Occasionally older if a big trigger has happened.
So in my Roman life, or my Egyptian life, and I was not beheaded in Rome, but some sort of horrible, eaten alive by beetles in Egypt or something like that. Hence, anytime I go to the zoo and I go into the beetles section, I'll go, I have a terrified thing. While other people just play with a beetle or play with a snake or something like that, and not have any issue whatsoever.
The interesting thing about snakes, I mean, we have an innate visceral fear around snakes for very, very obvious reasons. Same with fire, it's for obvious reasons. So spiders as well, and spiders and snakes. It's to do with the puncturing of the skin. It's those little fangs getting into skin, and so often people who pass out when they give blood or they get an injection. It's the puncturing the skin. The soul goes, oh my God, we're going to die. And they keel over. It's related to snake bite or dying by snake bite or spider bite in a past life.
And so can you, in this life, so let's say I have a trauma in this life. So when I was younger, I was in the hospital for a little while. And I had constant blood work done every day, and I'd never had a problem with it before, ever. I didn't bother, but because they kept sending in these students who had no idea how to find a vein, I was basically just being punctured constantly. And then I don't have a fear of needles by any stretch. I don't particularly like them, but I've gotten kind of over it. Like, I mean, like it is what it is, Unless and I always make sure, like, how long have you been doing this? Can you find a vein? Like I could talk to the person taking my blood. Yeah. Within a lifetime, can you work through a trauma?
Well, absolutely. Because you always want to find out what happened in the past. Like I said, you really have to skip back a life or several, to find whatever the original cause is. And what we're talking about here is that with any past life issue that's triggered, it's where you get a reaction that's maybe a little bit abnormal. It's a little bit above average. So what you're talking about is, I think anyone who's poked and prodded long enough is going to have an issue, but it's not going to probably end up in a complete phobia unless you had something in a past life, like I say, like snake bite or spider bite or something, or where the puncturing the skin is associated with death. And you, in that case, you would have to die, yes.
For it to continue forward.
Yeah.
So the other question I had, we spoke about before, is generational trauma. What is your understanding of like your own bloodline, why you incarnate into this family line, and dealing with trauma? So like, let's say, Uncle Bob's father, Uncle Bob's father, and grandfather and so on, were all alcoholics. And there was a lot of abuse in that line, in that family line. But when they get to him, Uncle Bob's like, I'm stopping this. There's no more. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to do it. And I stop this trauma, heal this trauma for the family line. Does that make sense? That
happens. And actually it's something I think you might have done. Okay. One thing I didn't mention about the little reading that I did for you is that you have, there are 10 missions for each lifetime. The missions are just a way to give a focus, and people will choose usually anywhere between 5 and 8 maybe.
So I have 10?
No, but the one I looked at, I couldn't tell you about all of them, sure. But one I looked at it's a mission of love. And a mission of love is, you don't need a mission of love to be loving. What it does is it's about healing the heart chakra, and also keeping the heart chakra open even when you're being triggered or there's trauma or something going on. The reason people choose a mission of love is usually to heal from a past life of something like rape or sexual abuse in a past life, where the soul will shut down the heart chakra. It does this to try and protect you when you're going through something traumatic. It's why people have out-of-body experiences sometimes when they're going through trauma, or they become numb. They're disconnecting. If they don't get the chance to reconnect to the whole mind, body, and spirit thing and heal the heart chakra in the past life, then they'll do it in this life. And choosing a mission of love helps to do that. So there will be some trauma like that in your past. You have the mission of love. And a lot of times, a sort of, like it's 100% a past life thing, the reason that you choose it. But maybe something like 80% of the time, what I see is somebody choosing a mission of love as well to help with not getting enough love in this life from the parents or whoever's charged with taking care of them. Or it can be to stop that generational trauma. It stops with me.
Right.
Because it prevents you from becoming embittered very often if you are, mistreated or you don't get the love that you want in this life. But it will also help to stop reacting the same way, it's been handed down through generations. And you'll be the one that goes, no, we're going to do things differently. We're going, and particularly coming from a more loving place. So that's a common thing to see in families. It's like it stops now with me, the old soul. I'm coming in here to heal something that otherwise would be continuing on.
Have you heard the concept of the Ascended Master? Obviously, you've heard of Ascended
I've
Masters.
heard of it. Yeah,
like these
right.
beings are Ascended Masters. To my understanding, I read this, I think, in Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda, stated that when a soul reaches enlightenment, for a better word, or breaks free from having to come down here again, like the soul has evolved to a certain level.
Right.
Once that soul does that, it erases karma for generations back. Like it just cleans everything out for that line of souls that have been in soul group or something along those lines. First off, have you ever heard anything like that? And then secondly, let's talk a little bit about karma from your point of view.
Right. Well, I can't really talk about again, it's one of those things that the spirit guides are not. It's not
Haven't
my
gone.
thing,
It's not. Yep.
you know.
Yep.
So I've got nothing I can
Add to
really
that.
say about
Enough.
it. You know,
Yeah.
I just don't.
You stay in your lane. I like
Exactly,
that. You
yeah.
stay in your lane. Yes,
I mean, I
yes.
could conjecture, you know, but
Yeah. That makes sense. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't matter.
But karma. No,
Yes.
I mean, I talk about this all the time.
Sure.
You know, it's something my spirit guides are always talking about. The first thing they always talk about karma is it's not punishment, because there is that idea that you're being punished.
Karma's a bitch.
Yeah, and
It's a bumper sticker, sir.
That's right, absolutely, and it's not. Karma is about really balancing
That's the
one
word I've used,
experience with something else. So, you know, for example, if you were, I don't know, I'll take an extreme example, but if you were a mass murderer in a past life,
I like to pick on Genghis Khan. Let's go with Genghis Khan. Yes.
well,
And he's a very famous one.
Oh my God, I'm not sure. I mean, if you'd have enough lives to clear the karma.
I mean, and we could talk about that as well. Like these people in history, Hitler and
Yeah.
Genghis Khan and Mao and all of these, and some that we don't even heard of, but killed millions and millions of people. How does that balance out? But go ahead.
Well, you see, people have an idea that you kill somebody in a past life and then you'll make some agreement. You'll say, okay, in this life now you kill me and we'll somehow balance it. But it doesn't work that way, because souls are, the sort of prime directive is, I mean, it doesn't work in practice necessarily like this, but the prime directive is to treat others as you would like to be treated yourself. And that would not involve murdering anybody.
Right.
When people
It's not
do,
very Christ-like.
yeah, well, exactly. When people, you know, murder, they're acting from ego. No soul comes into this world with the intention of hurting another soul.
Yeah. Babies
Not at all.
aren't generally knocking each other off.
Exactly.
I mean, unless there's a block involved or a piece of gum or something that they want.
Right.
But even then, murder is generally not what the
Generally,
baby
you usually feel pretty safe.
There
with
might be
them.
a slap or something, but that's it.
Yeah, like gun-toting toddlers. They're not really a thing.
We are in Texas. But anyway.
Yes. Maybe here. Okay. Yeah. What's more likely that will happen is that your soul will say, okay, well, I behaved very badly in the past life. And of course, the soul will have a lot of remorse about that. Even as the thing is happening, the soul will be going, no, please stop. Trying to get you to stop doing what you're doing. It's going so against the grain and its core values. So then it will get to the astral plane and go, oh, I feel really bad about that, and it will. One of the things that when you process your life as you go to the astral plane, you feel what you've inflicted on other people. It's how you learn. Mm-hmm. So you'll feel the hurts that you've imposed on others, mm-hmm. on the fear, the trauma, and so on. And it teaches the soul, like, oh my God, that was an awful thing to do, and how do I make up for it? So you might end up being a healer, a doctor, or finding some way to help humanity. Mm-hmm. You might be a humanitarian because you did some shitty stuff in the past. Mm-hmm. However, you could also, let's say you're on a battlefield and you get shot and your life is saved by a MASH unit and, a mobile hospital. You might karmically feel grateful for them saving your life, so then you become a healer or a humanitarian in the next life. The point is that none of us are supposed to know why people are doing this work. It's their karma, because we're not supposed to judge them and go, oh, that person works for Greenpeace or an organization like
because
that. They must have been really shitty in that past
lot of animals, or something like that. Yeah.
It could be just maybe they were, lived in a very toxic part of the world, and now they're wanting to, as a result of their experience, they want to help others. So we're not supposed to know why people are doing these things.
They just are.
But they just are. Yeah.
They're drawn to this work.
Yeah.
Regardless, can we touch upon wealth and prosperity and abundance in lifetimes? Because it's been, we were talking a little bit about this before we came on. It's like, there is this myth of like, if you're spiritual, you must be broke.
Right.
You have to be, penniless, to do the spiritual work, which is so counterintuitive. Like, well, if you're going to do work that's going to affect large amounts of people, you need resources, even if they're given to you. I'm not saying you have to, Yogananda had a beneficiary. And many of these spiritual teachers have beneficiaries that are able to amplify their message around the world. You could see it around the world now. But there is this idea that you cannot be wealthy or abundant in your life and also do a spiritual work. I'd love to hear your point of view of that in the past lives and karmic example.
Again, a karmic thing about if you've experienced extreme poverty in a past life. Actually, to clarify, there's no karma if you come into a past life and you're poor from beginning to end. You chose that. And so nothing went wrong.
Just an experience, because that is
what you chose. Yeah.
That's an experience. If you're constantly winning, it gets boring.
Well, we're all going to choose, that's the thing about the soul when it's making these choices about a lifetime. It's pragmatic. It's what do I have to learn? If it was down to our egos, we'd all be choosing to be billionaires. But
that's a life of materialism. It's
right.
Not it's like all about that.
Yeah.
No money is ever enough.
Oh yes. Well, that's a fear of loss. Absolutely. Where for young souls, they're in fact, the more money they often with young souls, it can happen with old souls too if they're blocked. The more money they have, the more they want to protect it. Now they've got something they could lose. It's
very funny you say that, because I've spoken to people like financial advisors, and they've spoken to me about that. They're like, I have a few, billionaire clients, and they are terrified of losing. They have, let's say they have $1 billion, just $1 billion.
Yeah.
For you and I to comprehend that kind of wealth is so it's just,
right.
It's so insane for one human being to have $1 billion and to be terrified of losing that. Where, in all honesty, after you get a house that's big enough, how big is a house for 2 people? How much space do you really need?
Right.
How many cars do you really need? How many jets do you really need? How many boats? Like, at a certain point, after you hit $5 million, does your life change a whole lot?
Right.
After you made a couple $1 million in the bank. A lot of people listening like, oh my God, a couple million. But let's just say you have a couple $1 million. Is your life going to change that drastically unless you change it? Like, I have to wear designer clothes now. I have to do this. I have to have this kind of car. Then, yeah, of course. But at a certain point, it's just numbers.
Right.
Right?
But what's fascinating is that, there's been, any number of studies where people have talked about, after 10 million, you get taxed 100% or something like that, it should max out. And young souls go, no, that's crazy. They'll never earn that money, but there's the idea in the back of the mind that maybe they could, or
what's the American dream?
That's really, yeah. And yet, you would be comfortable for the rest of your life.
Generational. It's generational wealth.
Yes, absolutely.
You have $10 million if you know what you're doing, even remotely. Your kids.
Well, even if you don't know what you're doing, it'd be pretty hard to burn through that.
I've seen some people. I've worked in Hollywood. In Hollywood, you could burn $10 million in 5 seconds.
Yes.
And have something that's worthless.
Right.
At the end of it.
Yeah. So, but in the main,
sure,
but that is the fear of loss. And I was saying how it doesn't get triggered by having nothing in a past life. It's going from one state to another. If you were comfortably middle class, or even just you could be relatively poor, but you become completely homeless. Mm-hmm. Something happens, father goes bankrupt, the entire family, they end up with nothing. Mm-hmm. That creates the fear because you're going from one state to another. And interestingly, a lot of people don't know they have a fear of loss until they have something to lose. Same thing, like with the billionaire.
Yeah, if you're broke.
Now it doesn't show up when you're broke.
Right.
Um,
Interesting. That's
having-
why. That's why people with lottery wins. I did a documentary series years ago about that, about lottery winners.
Yeah.
Most of them lose it all,
Absolutely.
self-destructs. They can't understand. They can't. They're not prepared to handle that kind of energy in their life. Like if $1 billion showed up in my bank account tomorrow, I would probably react very differently than someone who's very used to having $1 billion in their bank account. They'll know what to do, where to do. I would probably be very terrified and just kind of like, okay, let's just put this away. Let me figure this out.
Yes. Let's take some time.
Let me take some time. Let's look at things. But a lot of people get $1 billion like, woohoo, let's go. I'm going to buy this mansion. I'm going to buy that.
God.
And then it all starts.
I can't remember if I put it in this book or one of my books or if I wrote about it somewhere else. But there was a woman in England back in the 1960s. Viv Richards, I think was her name. She won, like in the lottery or football pools or whatever they had there. She won, I think it was £1 million, and which allowing for inflation was a heck of a lot more. Would be a heck of a lot more now.
$1 million still works today, by the way.
Yeah,
you can buy a nice apartment in New York.
She was
not even actually.
You can buy a closet in New York.
You can buy a closet in New York for $1 million.
She was asked by the press what she was going to do with the money, and she famously said, "I'm going to spend, spend, spend." It was the headline in all the papers.
Of course.
And she did, and she blew through the whole amount in just a couple of years, right back down to zero. Mm-hmm. It's so funny you bring this up because I talk to clients about this all the time. What you have is, it's like if you have a past life where you've lost everything, then when you have the money, deep down what the fear tells the soul is that you're going to lose it all.
So might as well.
So you might as well spend it. And it becomes a race to the bottom. I actually have a client who was given $1 million gift by her ex-husband. Blew through it in a couple of years, I think. It was a very short period of time. And
it takes time. I mean,
I was trying to explain this principle to her, and she was going, yeah, but I didn't know my investments weren't going to work out. But she was investing in foreign currency exchange.
Oh, yeah, she was very shady stuff.
Very high risk stuff. Sure. Now, I mean, occasionally you get people with a fear of loss, much less common, where they're on top of every penny. They've lost it all before. Yeah, and the micromanagement, but that's very rare.
But they're going to die of stress because they're worried constantly.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's the way to live. I mean,
I
think. I mean, I know myself. I've been able, different times in my life. I've had having money and lost it. I mean, I've been divorced a few times, so I know what it's like to have money and not have money. And generally, I'm able to, or I've worked through the fear, but generally in the past, I've been able to get through any amount of money. I mean, it's not like I've had huge wealth. I mean, we're not talking millions here. We're talking about thousands. But it goes as quickly as it comes in. Generally,
for you,
for me, yeah, and it is to do with past life fear of loss. Now I've worked through it, so I'm better able to say.
And now you're loaded, so I understand.
Yeah, it would be a fine thing. But it goes back to people. I literally get letters from people going, I don't think you should be charging for your work. It's not spiritual. And I'm thinking, I never respond, I mean, but it's like, well, you don't know how much it costs to run this business. We do so much stuff for free. We've got our, we have a Soul World Sunday that we do. It's we have to hire staff. We've got the cost. I mean, well, you know what it costs to run a business, and or put your kids through college or whatever it might be.
Put gas in the tank.
And these people want you to think they should live in a paper bag at the end of the road because
that's
you're
somehow
doing spiritual work.
But that's their own programming, and that's their own past life trauma that they're bringing into this thing.
Right.
But the thing is, like, content might be free, but it's not free to create. That's the bottom line. To be able to put on a show like this and do a high quality show and bring high quality guests in and so on, it takes time, and your work takes time and takes money, takes resources.
Sure.
So I have no problem with abundance. And if you look at nature is abundant. An apple tree doesn't count the apples on its tree. There's more than it's too many apples actually come out of a tree,
Right.
generally speaking. So there's no scarcity in nature. So why should there be any scarcity in our world? But also it's what you do with that money.
Oh, it's so much what you do with it.
What you do, how you treat it, how you treat other people, what you
Yeah.
can do to help. If it's all about ego, then it's going to destroy you.
Well, if you're like, I don't want to spend all the time beating
Sure.
up on Musk, but why not? There's somebody who he actually had the opportunity. They said, you could end world hunger basically with a fraction of what he's got.
Sure.
He goes, oh, sure, I'll do that. Never followed through. I mean, there's a man who could change people's lives and never even notice it. I mean, my God, he's the richest.
Oh yeah, you put him,
man
Gates,
ever.
Bezos.
How they could change the world and they don't. And again, it's the fear of loss with younger souls. They it's the greed, I mean, I don't call him the richest man in the world. I call him the greediest man in the world.
Ainsley, I mean, I don't know about you, but if I can't even get out of up in the morning without $200 billion in the bank.
I know.
I mean, it's just not
Well,
easy. It's not. Things are expensive. Inflation, eggs. I mean,
if
eggs are
you're
costing
gonna have
so
eggs
much
for breakfast,
now.
sure.
I mean, we laugh and we joke about it because it's ridiculous for us to look at this like, if I've said this so many times on the show, I'm like, if $100 million showed up tomorrow, I'd be like, great, now I can get to work.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can go do some stuff. Like now I have the resources to really help people, to put out content that I really want to help people.
Yeah, it gets you out of the basic survival
create
mode.
foundations to help people. Like,
Yeah.
It's all about that. That's the only thing. I would never in a billion years sit on an island somewhere drinking a margarita for the rest of my life. It would drive me insane.
Yes.
It's not what I'm supposed to be doing.
Exactly. Well, the people like you and I, older souls with a purpose, it would be nice to have that security, but it's the freedom that it buys you. That's what the old soul is looking for.
Oh yeah.
It gives you the opportunity to be able to do the things that will change people's lives and make a difference.
Without having to worry about how am I going to pay rent.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. I'm going to ask you now a few questions because I could keep talking to you, Ainsley, for hours.
And I could keep yakking, as you probably noticed, I love my work. And
as I do, as do I, my friend, as do I. I'll ask you a few questions to ask all my guests.
Sure.
What is your definition of living a fulfilled life?
Well, because of doing the work that I do, I'd say it's living the life that your soul intended. It's like in every moment you want to feel like you're doing something that is giving you purpose and meaning.
How do you find that, though?
Well, it starts by understanding who you are. I always say that. That's I think I said it before. Who you are is why you're here. And once you understand the personality that you brought into this world, then you can start finding things that really bring you meaning. I'm a full-blown creator soul type. I've got loads of past lives as an artist. I was a cartoon illustrator for 20 years. I paint now. And
musician,
a musician, absolutely. So, and it's so funny, like people about my creativity, people might go, "Oh my God, you're such a Renaissance man! And is there anything you can't do?" And I go, "Look, I have about 5 talents. I can, and they're all creative. I can paint, I can write, and blah blah blah. But after that, it just boom, it just falls off like." Don't ask me to balance a checkbook. I would know.
Don't ask me to do math.
Oh no.
Don't ask me to do math. Don't ask me to find directions.
Oh my God, directions.
Directions. Don't ask me where do you go? I'm like, if I don't have a Google map, forget it. My wife looks at me all the time.
You may have my condition, which is dyscalculia. You should look it up. It's like when I discovered that one of the signs of it is not being able to distinguish between left and right. It was like, oh my God.
Well, I can do that.
Oh, you can?
I can do that. And I can also, if I focus my mind on it, I can get around, no problem. But my point is I just don't care. It's something I don't want to think about. It's like one of those things like, just tell me where to go. And my wife's like, you've lived here for 10 years. You don't know how to get, I'm like, tell me where to go.
That's such an old soul. I have the same thing. It just doesn't feel important.
I just don't care. Like math, I'm like, ugh.
Yeah.
That's why we have the women in our lives that help us with that, to balance, if you will.
Driving with my wife Christine, it's great because she knows that I have this problem. So she's in the passenger seat going, "You need to turn left," and she non-dominant hand. All right, or she points, like, making sure it's really clear, because otherwise she'll say turn left, and I'll be.
Ainsley, get out of my car, sir. Get out of my car. That's exactly what happens with me. She's like, turn left. Did I have to tell you to turn left? I'm like, I was somewhere else. I was not right here.
Yeah.
If you had a chance to go back in time and speak to little Ainsley, what advice would you give him?
Oh gosh. Oh, well, I think I would tell younger me, make sure I was using the right part of my anatomy when I made decisions about relationships.
That's very wise words for all men and women, but specifically men.
A little more discernment.
A little bit more discernment. These are things you needed to work out in this life.
Yeah. Oh, it was. I'm all about love, and it's like very much confusing, kind of.
But you don't have to marry them all.
No, I know. I did.
Fair enough. How do you define God or source?
Well, I talk about spirit guides all the time, and whether it really, to me, it feels like whether you're talking to however you identify it, spirit guides, God, higher power, goddess, whatever. These are terms that are just referring to some higher level of energy. Mm-hmm. And for me, when I first started working with the spirit world, I said, well, how do you want to be addressed? Is there some sort of groovy name we can find? They just said spirit guides. So that's it, simple as that.
And you have multiple spirit guides that speak out of one voice, essentially?
Yeah.
Like it's a collective.
It's a collective, and but it's one voice.
Fair enough. What is love?
Well, there's different ways, but I think to express that, but I think love it's about having an open heart, and it's also being fearless, because it really is if you talked about enlightenment earlier on, from my spirit guide's point of view, being enlightened is the absence of fear.
Yes.
Once you get rid of your fears, then nothing is left but the heart and the soul and that connection with the soul. It's only fear that blocks the connection between the conscious mind and the soul.
That's beautifully said. Beautifully said. If you could ask God or source one question, what would it be?
Oh, I ask questions all the time. That's a really hard one.
Because you've got a straight hookup.
I've got a straight line.
You got the red phone on the.
Oh my God!
Yeah. Right in.
Yeah, whatever I want to know, I can ask.
Fair
I don't
enough.
always get answers. There's certain things that are not in my highest interest to know, but.
So the lottery ticket numbers, not so much.
That's what. Well, we're working on that one. We thought, actually, Christine's father, who's long deceased, he wants to start helping us with lottery tickets. And there was a woman who turned up to collect her winnings from the California lottery with a Ouija board under her arm. So people do that.
That's brilliant.
So far, my spirit guides have not shown any interest in doing that, but it's
giving you millions of dollars. That's good. They're good spirit guides. They're doing the good work for you this time. And what is the ultimate purpose of life?
The ultimate purpose is really to, oh my gosh, it's on two levels. One is to really be who you are, to be authentic, the authentic person that you're meant to be. But the other thing is to really live a spiritual life. And, this is we were talking about before. It's a lot more than just, having a meditation practice and doing some yoga. These are means to an end, not the end itself,
Namaste.
Yes, exactly. It's like, it's not just about wishing people namaste. It's like, it's about how you show up for other people. It's
service.
It's service to others, and in a very, it's a broad way, but it's about positively affecting other people. That's real spirituality. That's what spirituality is about. And for that reason, that's one of the reasons that spirituality and politics are inseparable. You know, there's this idea that I'm spiritual, so I'm above politics. Well, that again is, you know, wonderful if you're in your beach house in Malibu and, you know, you're above all that. But there are people who are really suffering. For every person that says, well, you know, I'm spiritual, not political, there's a 10-year-old child in Texas, probably here, ready to give birth to her stepfather's baby. You know, there's a lot of, you know, major problems out there affecting people. And just because it's not affecting you does not mean everything in the world is just perfect. We should all be thinking about others.
And where can people find out more about you, pick up a copy of the Old Souls Guidebook, and find out more about what you do in the world, sir?
Oh, well, you can go to soulworld.com and you can learn all about what I do there. That will take you to our membership program, the Soul World, and which is an amazing gathering place for old souls. And we have a very lively forum. It really is it's a community that we've created. You can find my book through, you know, order it online. I really try these days to find alternatives to Amazon. You know, they don't need your dollars. So go to an independent bookstore and order it is what I would recommend.
Fair enough.
Or you can just go to AinsleyMacLeod.com and you can learn all about what I do there.
And do you or your spirit guides have any parting messages for the audience?
Oh, well, I'd just like to maybe just leave a message that just remember it's all about love. And, you know, we're all here as old souls to learn compassion and extend that to other people. It's, you know, being a loving presence in the world. From the time I was little, it was like always going, what is so hard about kindness? What is the effing problem there? Why is it so hard for people? And I think that's the important thing. You know, if you want to show people that you're a spiritually oriented old soul, it starts with kindness. Just be compassionate and kind to other people.
If you want to change
and yourself, I should point out.
If you want to change the world, you need to start with changing yourself.
That's right.
Ainsley, it's been such a pleasure meeting you and talking to you today. I'm looking forward to our next conversation. I appreciate you and everything you're doing to help awaken the planet, my friend. So thank you.
Well, back at you, and thank you so much. I really, really appreciate the conversation. Great questions.
Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.